CNBC आवाज पर आपका स्वागत है। हमारी इस खास चर्चा में हमारे साथ हैं RBI के गवर्नर डॉक्टर रघुराम राजन। डॉक्टर राजन, स्वागत है आपका। आपकी पॉलिसी के तुरंत बाद जिस तरह से 3 बैंकों ने 3-4 दिन के अंदर ही अपने होम लोन के रेट्स कम किए और स्पेशल ऑफर्स दे दिए, ऐसा लगा कि आपने रेट घटाने के सिग्नल दिए हैं। क्या ये रीडिंग सही है?
नहीं, रीडिंग सही नहीं है। हमने बस यही कहा कि हम डेटा को देखने वाले हैं और अगर इन्फ्लेशन नंबर्स नीचे आ जाते हैं तो हम अकॉर्डिंगली इंटरेस्ट रेट सेट करेंगे, लेकिन अगर बढ़ेगा तो हमें कुछ और करना चाहिए।
तो आपको क्या लगता है फिर ये कम्युनिकेशन कहीं गलत हुआ बैंकों को कि उन्होंने तुरंत ये ऑफर्स दे दिए?
बैंक्स आर लुकिंग एट द कॉस्ट of funding and doing what they think is appropriate. I think they will also watch the policy. वो देखेंगे हम क्या करेंगे and they will act accordingly once the next policy statement is made. All we have said is that we are waiting for more data. That just one set of inflation numbers, because there's a lot of noise in it, because food inflation was very high. We're not going to act trigger happy. We're not going to, because जब हम रेट बढ़ाते हैं तो it takes about 6 months to 9 months for it to have effect. So we are setting rates now for the economy 6 to 9 months ahead. So we want to be sure that when we are doing something, we're doing it based on what we think the economy will look like, what we think inflation will look like. We're not going to react to every spike in say vegetable prices, and we think that spike showed some signs of coming down by the time we had to set policy, and so we said let's wait and see how this plays out. We're not in any way saying that we are done.
इसका मतलब यह है कि अगर आप 6 से 9 महीने आगे देख रहे हैं तो 6 से 9 महीने आगे आपको लगता है कि दोनों होलसेल प्राइस इंडेक्स और रिटेल प्राइस इंडेक्स काफी नीचे होंगे, आपके टारगेट के आसपास होंगे?
We don't know, because it depends on how the economy is reacting to past interest rates.
आज आपका assumption वो है?
No, आज हमारा assumption ये है कि हमें और देखना चाहिए. We have to see more data to see how the economy is responding. The last data showed the economy was not responding, but that data was also influenced by some very high spikes in vegetable prices. We'll wait for one more month.
तो ये possibility है कि जिस तरह से आपने कहा कि एक डिसइन्फ्लेशनरी ट्रेंड चल रहा है, चूंकि बहुत ज़्यादा मंदी है, चूंकि 4-4.5% GDP ग्रोथ है, IIP क्लोज टू 0 ही चल रहा है, अभी 2 साल होने आ गए, तो इसकी वजह से अगर आप अभी रेट ना भी बढ़ाएं तो भी महंगाई की जो रेट इस समय है, चाहे वो करीब 8% पे WPI हो या 11-12% पे रिटेल इन्फ्लेशन हो, ये अपने आप भी कुछ महीनों में नीचे आ सकते हैं?
हाँ, ये पॉसिबिलिटी है. देयर मेनी फोर्सेस. वन, हार्वेस्ट हैज बीन गुड. The good harvest will tend to bring down food prices, which has been a big factor. Second, we are seeing, a stronger exchange rate than there was a few months back. That will also help bring food prices. And third, the point you made, that output, utpadan, बहुत ही weak है. It's very, very low. So the difference between what the economy can produce and how much it's producing, the spare capacity is quite a bit. That tends to bring down prices. Why? Because your motor vehicle producer says, I'm not selling anything. Maybe if my costs permit, I can bring down prices. Some people have raised their prices. Others are actually cutting, giving more discounts because they can't raise prices. In that environment, prices can also fall of their own accord, or at least not rise as much. So we're waiting to see whether those effects are playing out and whether vegetable prices, which were spiking up, whether they'll come down. And we'll take an overall view. So at this point, we're not saying we're done, but let us take a view based on data without reacting to every sort of sharp movement in the data.
ज़्यादातर इकोनॉमिस्ट जिनसे हमने बात की तो उनका ये कहना है कि 8.5-9% के आसपास रिटेल इन्फ्लेशन शायद आ सकती है 6 महीने में, उससे नीचे आएगी उनको नहीं लगता, क्योंकि जो स्ट्रक्चरल फैक्टर्स मैंने आपको बताया, क्योंकि ये रेट साल दर साल बढ़ते ही जा रहे हैं. तो जैसे आपने लगातार सिग्नल दिया है कि आप रिटेल इन्फ्लेशन अब देख रहे हैं, तो भी आप तो फिर इंटरेस्ट रेट बढ़ाने के अलावा आपके पास कोई ऑप्शन बचता नहीं है.
No, so what is the reason you want to raise interest rates? One is to bring demand consistent with supply, and we'll have to figure out how much we have to do of that. We'll take a call over time. The second element of that is what you're doing is also increasing the attractiveness of savings. If you see, financial savings in our economy has also come down, especially household savings. You want to give a good return more than inflation to people who put their money in deposits. So that would be another reason to bring inflation down and interest rates consistent with the inflation level.
तो आपकी पूरी बात से ऐसा लग रहा है कि आपने जो इनिशियली आते ही ये सिग्नल दिया था कि आप इन्फ्लेशन पे फोकस रखेंगे, कि इन्फ्लेशन टारगेटिंग की बात जो ग्लोबली कही जाती है उसको फॉलो करेंगे. अब शायद 3 महीनों में आपका व्यू थोड़ा सा चेंज हुआ है कि आप ग्रोथ को भी बराबर वेटेज देना चाहते हैं, उसको भी एक होलिस्टिक पिक्चर लेके चलना चाहते हैं.
So don't get me wrong. Inflation targeting doesn't mean that you don't keep an eye on growth, because the level of growth of the economy tells you how much disinflation there's already in the system. What you're trying to say is, I want to bring inflation down. Okay? In an environment where there's strong growth, the answer is very easy. I'll just raise interest rates very high because I need to bring growth also down. But in an environment where growth is very weak, the weak growth is already doing some of your work for you. So you have to calibrate in a more careful way. Remember, when we raised interest rates in September, nobody thought we would raise interest rates, right? We raised interest rates again. So nobody should doubt our desire to fight inflation and our belief that interest rates are the main tool that we have. Nobody should doubt that. All we are saying is that we want to wait for data to see how the work we've done so far is playing out. And then we'll take the next step. Don't judge me by whether I raise interest rates at every meeting. In fact, before this meeting itself, we had said, let's pause and wait for the data. And we got the inflation numbers. That pushed us closer to the edge. But when we looked at the inflation numbers, what we saw was a lot of it was because of vegetable prices. And if you looked at the core inflation numbers, the momentum was relatively flat. So we said, okay, let's wait one more sort of round of data to see how it looks. And if we see that we are having some effect, let's make a judgment at that point about how much we need to do.
पर थोड़ी कंफ्यूजन इसलिए भी है कि आप अगर रिटेल इन्फ्लेशन को वॉच कर रहे हैं तो फिर आपका वो टारगेट क्या है, आप अभी तक बताते नहीं.
Because I'm telling you, I can't tell you a target until I know how our measures are effective. See, what happens is there are two things at work. One is the what we call the output gap. How much output is below the potential for the economy. If it is far below, that means you're not using enough of your capacity, and industry will cut prices. That will bring down inflation. The second is expectations. Now, anybody who's telling you interest rates should be far higher is usually putting a lot more weight on expectation formation. They say somehow if you raise interest rates to 12, 13, 14%, people will sense inflation will come down, inflation will actually come down, and that will be the way you will work. Now, that's a much more theoretical sort of channel through which it works. It's less clear that works as effectively in India. I want to give some opportunity for the data to tell me that it is working. Then I will act. But let nobody be confused that our aim is to bring down inflation.
लेकिन ऐसा लगता है कि आप शायद पसंद करते हैं कि लोग गेस करते रहें कि दरअसल गवर्नर क्या करने वाले हैं. इस सवाल का जवाब लेंगे आगे एक ब्रेक के बाद. डॉक्टर राजन, जैसे कि हमने पहले आपसे बात की कि इन्फ्लेशन का आपका क्या टारगेट है किसी को पता नहीं है, लोग गेस करते हैं. ऐसा लगता है आप जब आए तो आपने कहा कि आप एक मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क के लिए कमेटी बना रहे हैं और आप बहुत ही ट्रांसपेरेंसी चाहते हैं, लेकिन दरअसल आपकी स्ट्रैटेजी ये है कि आप मार्केट को सरप्राइज करें.
नहीं, स्ट्रैटेजी नहीं है कि सरप्राइज करें. When I don't know, I don't want to tell you I know. What I don't know is the pace at which consumer prices react to the state of the economy. We have more confidence in wholesale prices because we have a whole series we have seen that happen. That the target for the RBI, headline at 5, core at 3 approximately. That's been the target. It's out there. It's the target that we are also looking at. We would feel more comfortable if headline came below 5. I can tell you that clearly. We have a new series for consumer prices. We don't know too much about how it behaves. And you just told me it has been sticky for so many months. We have to see how it reacts.
तो अगर WPI के और कोर WPI के टारगेट्स अचीव हो जाते हैं तो उस समय जो भी कॉरस्पॉन्डिंग कोर के लेवल्स होंगे आप उसको कंफर्टेबली ले लेंगे?
नहीं, I will not be comfortable with only WPI coming under control. What Aam Aadmi sees is CPI. So I need CPI also to come under control. Now, what you're asking me is what does it mean to be under control? Well, I will tell you that as I get more confidence in the pace at which CPI sort of comes down. What I will tell you right now is CPI at 11.2 headline, 8 point something core, 8.2 is too high. We need to bring it down.
Okay. आपकी स्ट्रैटेजी पे अगर वापस आए तो ऐसा लगता है कि आपके पहले आरबीआई ने बार बार रुपये को कंट्रोल करने के लिए इंटरवीन किया, तो जब भी इंटरवेंशन होता था रुपया थोड़ा कंट्रोल में आता था, लोग फिर डॉलर खरीदते थे और 4 दिन के बाद प्रॉफिट में आ जाते थे। तो ट्रेडर्स एक्चुअली आरबीआई के अगेंस्ट ट्रेड करके मुनाफा कमा रहे थे। आपके आने के बाद अब ट्रेडर्स आरबीआई की साइड में ट्रेड करने लगे क्योंकि आपने उनको कंट्रोल में कर लिया। तो ये आप ट्रेडर की साइकी को समझ के उस हिसाब से रिएक्ट कर रहे हैं?
I don't know. I think traders basically make up their mind whichever way. If they think your policy has a chance of working, they will trade with you. There's a saying elsewhere, never trade against the central bank. I think RBI is a very powerful central bank, and if it wants to, it can hit traders pretty severely. I don't think that's our intent. Our intent is to create an environment where there is a certain amount of predictability. You asked me, are you deliberately trying to surprise the market? No. But I'm also not going to allow the market to push me into a particular corner. And when I told you there are multiple disinflationary processes that can, channels through which inflation can come down, I want to see how they work before I make a decision. I won't be pushed into a decision. But I will make a decision with the idea of bringing inflation down. So the idea is not to surprise markets or to surprise traders, but to give them an environment where they sense they have confidence that you're moving in the right direction. And I want to tell people we are moving in the right direction, whether it's on inflation or it is on structural reforms.
Similarly, जैसे कि ऑयल मार्केटिंग कंपनीज को लेकर के मार्केट इस फिराक में था कि जब भी ऑयल मार्केटिंग कंपनीज मार्केट में आएंगी तो फिर रुपया कमज़ोर होगा, उस समय हम डॉलर लॉन्ग करेंगे। लेकिन इनफैक्ट न्यूज़ आने के बाद जो मूवमेंट आया वो फिर बहुत जल्दी कंट्रोल में आ गया। तो ये भी जो आपकी स्ट्रेटेजी रही, आप कह रहे थे कि कैलिब्रेटेड तरीके से धीरे धीरे ओएमसीज को उतारेंगे, लेकिन आपने कब उनको मार्केट में भेजा ये आपने बताया नहीं।
That was deliberate to keep it from the market because we worried कि if the market is guessing आज आएंगे, कल आएंगे, परसों आएंगे, तो there will be volatility. They will try and anticipate, they will come in, they will come out. So we said, trust us, we'll bring them back and don't worry about them. When they come back, it will not upset the market. And so we moved to move them quickly back on market. When we moved them back on market, we told the market, we would have done everything quietly and said they're back on market. We said we will start bringing them on market. On that we were transparent. Precise dates when we brought them more into the market, we didn't want to reveal because people will start getting anxious once they anticipate a schedule of, we debated this. And finally we decided on this issue, maybe the market will feel more confident when it's behind rather than anticipating. Same way as markets were getting anxious about the taper when it was in front of them. But once it was behind them, they didn't want it. They seem to have taken it in their stride.
Finally, जब आपने मार्केट को इन्फॉर्म किया या मार्केट को पता चल गया फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री से, वो भी प्लान था या वो अनप्लान था?
No comment.
ओके, इस पर हम लौट के आएंगे। लेकिन आपने जो पूरी तैयारी की थी कि फेड की टेपरिंग को कैसे आप कंट्रोल में रखेंगे और उसको रिस्पॉन्ड करने के लिए एक बफर बनाएंगे, जो कि आपने बनाया FCNR डिपॉजिट्स के जरिए। लोग ये भी नहीं समझ पा रहे हैं कि क्या ये आपकी जो स्ट्रैटेजी थी इसकी एक्चुअल कॉस्ट कितनी है और कब हमें समझ में आएगी। क्या ये बेटर ऑप्शन था एक सॉवरेन बॉन्ड जो प्लेन वनीला हम बात कर रहे थे उसके मुकाबले में?
सॉवरेन बॉन्ड में भी कॉस्ट है। लास्ट टाइम SBI did a sovereign bond, we guaranteed exchange rates on those. So those are costs which are borne by the central bank. This time what we did was we told individual banks that we would offer them a swap. If effective, it was a subsidized swap. The effective subsidy was about 3.5%. Okay, so that's a cost. That's not the entire additional cost, because if we had done a sovereign bond, we would have guaranteed that sovereign bond, which would have involved similar costs. So I don't think the incremental cost of this versus the sovereign bond option is any different. We would have to pay something like this. Precise calculations I won't give you now, but it would be something similar. Now 3.5%, think of it as a subvention, whichever method you use. Now what is the benefit of that subvention? Let's say the rupee was stronger by 2 rupees a dollar, okay? That's about 3% stronger. Let's say that's all. Effectively it came down from 68 to 62, but let's say only 2 of that is because of the money that we raised. Now 2 rupees means 3% stronger rupee. Our imports are 500 billion a year, okay? If we are 3% stronger for the rupee, we are saving $15 billion worth in terms of value. We're saving $15 billion, the cost we are paying is 350 million per year for 10 billion. We raised about 26 billion through the FCNR, so that's about $1 billion a year. So we're saving we're paying $1 billion a year, it's costing us 15 billion. Saving us 15 billion. Trade-off? I think I'd take the 15 billion. Could we have done it better? Probably. If we think about it, there may be a cheaper way of doing it. But remember, you get only one chance to try it. Because if it failed, you couldn't go back to the market and say, wait, I've readjusted the scheme, here's the new scheme. It was the enthusiasm for the scheme which allowed us to raise as much money as we raised. So maybe we could have done it cheaper in some other way, put some bells and whistles. When we were negotiating with the banks, we told them, this is the amount. They said, no, you give us this guarantee, give us that guarantee, give us something else. At one point we said, no, this is it, take it or leave it. And we put it on the table. And then the scheme worked out and worked out well. So I think we can spend a lot of time figuring out whether it was the best thing possible.
जो टेपर की बात होने की वजह से मई से जो आउटफ्लो शुरू हुआ था, इक्विटी तो वापस आ गया है, डेट का जो पैसा है वो उस तरह वापस आता हुआ नहीं दिख रहा है। और जो आप बॉन्ड इंडेक्स की बात कर रहे हैं, उस पर हमने अब तक जो बात की है कुछ एफआईआई से, उनकी जो डिमांड्स हैं मुझे नहीं लगता कि बहुत आसानी से मीट हो सकती है। उनका कहना है कि सारा का सारा जो बॉन्ड पोर्टफोलियो है वो एमटीएम होना चाहिए, यानी आपको हेल्ड टू मैच्योरिटी कैटेगरी खत्म कर देनी चाहिए, एसएलआर आपको कम करना चाहिए, जो कि अभी फिस्कल डेफिसिट को देखते हुए काफ़ी मुश्किल है। तो वो टारगेट आप कब तक अचीव कर पाएंगे?
अभी तो डेट फ्लोज वापस आ रहे हैं। यू सी इन दिसंबर कि बदल गया, फ्रॉम आउटफ्लोज दे स्टार्टेड यू सीइंग मोर इनफ्लोज, एंड लेट्स सी, आई मीन विद द volatility coming down, we may see more debt inflows. On the index and deepening liquidity, I mean, we're still talking to the index players, but also there are other options that we're exploring. One is to make bonds euro clearable. If you make bonds euro clearable, the same bond which is traded here can be bought by somebody from Europe here, or somebody from Singapore in India. So you're not taking away liquidity from the Indian market by making it euro clearable. That is consistent with going on the index, but can be viewed as a separate item. And we are in strong discussions with the Euroclear people whether they use a local entity who will trade, allow them trades on their behalf. That will preserve liquidity in the local market, but also allow foreign investors easy access to the Indian market. That seems a step which we can do. I mean, I'm very enthusiastic about it. Finance Ministry is enthusiastic. So that is something we can proceed on much more strongly.
लेकिन HTM कैटेगरी को खत्म करना या SLR को रिड्यूस करना, ये भी आपका एक मीडियम टर्म टारगेट होगा?
HTM we were trying to bring down anyway, even before this. अभी तो because of mark-to-market losses, we've allowed some forbearance in moving items to the HTM category. But going forward, we will see. The intent is bring everything down on pace. It will have to accompany also government finances. We can't reduce SLR drastically without government also improving finances. But with the medium-term framework the government has listed out, I think over time we can bring down SLR.
एक आखिरी बात इस पूरे इशू पे, जो शायद आखिरी टास्क बाकी रह गया है, नॉर्मलाइज करने का मार्केट को, कि गोल्ड इंपोर्ट पे जो बैन है इसको धीरे धीरे खत्म किया जाए। क्या आपको लगता है कि जल्दी होगा?
हमने बैन नहीं किया गोल्ड इंपोर्ट्स को, हमने क्या टैक्सेस बढ़ाए और ये एक्सपोर्ट नॉर्म हमने रखा. They have to export 20% of imports and there are tariffs. I think as time goes on, we will unwind these measures. We have to be more confident about the sustainability of our current account deficit. I think the good news is exports are picking up. There was last month readings weren't as good as the previous months, but if we see that strong exports as well as other imports are not as strong as before, then we will have more confidence to bring down some of these measures. I have no doubt that we will bring them down over time.
कोई टाइम फ्रेम देना मुमकिन है गोल्ड के?
It depends on the pace at which the current account deficit comes down. I think whatever actions we take have to be one way. We can't sort of bring it down then bring it up. That kind of volatility we should not, policy volatility we should not induce. Once we start bringing it down, we should do that in a measured way and in one direction.
एक बहुत ही नोटेड इकोनॉमिस्ट हैं जो सरकार के साथ भी काम करते रहते हैं कई एक प्रोजेक्ट्स पे, उनका एक एनालिसिस मैंने देखा जहां वो ये कहते हैं कि दरअसल गोल्ड का इंपोर्ट रोकने से कैट पे फर्क नहीं पड़ता. उनका कहना है कि गोल्ड जो स्मगल होके आ रहा है उसका पेमेंट इनफैक्ट इंपोर्ट और एक्सपोर्ट की ओवर इन्वॉइसिंग या अंडर इन्वॉइसिंग करके किया जा रहा है और नेट नेट आपका जो ट्रेड डेटा आप रिलीज कर रहे हैं ऑफिशियली वो डिस्टॉर्ट हो रहा है, पर कैट उसकी वजह से कम नहीं हो रहा.
No, but if that were true, we should see a very different picture in terms of the announced data. Another way of saying the same thing is that people are saying this will be financed by remittances. Instead of sending you dollars into the country, they will pay the hawala operator in Dubai or some other country from where gold is coming the dollar amount, so it won't come into the country, it will go there, and the reverse transaction will take place inside the country when the gold is brought in. But we haven't seen a sharp fall in remittances so far. I'm not saying smuggling is not a problem, it is picking up, but from a low base. And I have no doubt that if we continue with these measures over the longer run, smuggling will pick up more strongly. I do think that there has been a fall off in gold demand. Partly because gold prices haven't risen so much in the last year. In fact, gold has been a very bad investment in most countries. And so people are wary of investing in gold. And so there has been a fall off in gold demand, which has been helpful. So I don't think the entire sort of numbers for the gold industry which are showing up have to be disbelieved. The gold industry is going on as it is. Instead of importing legitimately, everything is being smuggled, and we have the same old problem. I don't think that's true, but I do think that we can't stay with these measures for too long because those kinds of things will pick up.
ओके, लेते हैं यहाँ पे एक छोटा सा ब्रेक और बाद में आगे बात करेंगे हम एनपीएस की समस्या को हल करने के लिए आरबीआई ने जो हाल में कदम उठाए हैं उनकी वजह से किस तरह से इसको काबू में आते हुए देखते हैं आरबीआई गवर्नर. डॉक्टर राजन, जो एनपीएस को टैकल करने के लिए आपने नए ड्राफ्ट नॉर्म्स फिलहाल रिलीज किए हैं, किस तरह की टाइमलाइन आप लेके चल रहे हैं इसके लिए?
I think we want banks to start dealing more quickly with their NPAs which are building up, and I think the idea is to get the sort of paper out and the circulars starting early next year. So by about end of January, we'll get comments by early January, but the paper should be out and the processes that we need will start being put in place by the second half of January. Now, I think across the world, if you see, countries that have fixed their growing bad loan problem early have done much better than countries that have allowed them to fester and washed for a long time. We need to do this quickly, we need to do it early. Now, of course, whenever you put out something like that, the whole bunch of analysts start talking, are you doing everything that needs to be done? How are you dealing with the flow of bad loans? After all, you're dealing only with the stock and so on. I think we have to make a beginning somewhere. That really is the issue. We have to make a beginning somewhere. You have to give incentives for recognition to the banks so that they recognize the problem early, that they take steps to resolve the problem quickly, and we're giving incentives for them to do it, and then they start recovery. Ultimately, our aim is first put the project back on track. There are lots of projects which are stuck for other reasons, but we don't want a project to be stuck for financial reasons. Put the project back on track. That is the best way to enhance value. Second, allow the banks, which are often, not exclusively, often public sector banks, to recover money, because after all, this is taxpayer money, this is public's money. They should be able to recover money. And third, the promoter should not get a really bad deal, because otherwise promoters will lose the incentive to invest. We want the promoters to be able to invest. So get the project back on track, recover for the public sector banks, and then also it should be fair to all parties, banks, promoter, etc. Those are the steps we're trying to implement through this recovery package.
लेकिन आप जैसे कह रहे हैं कि PSUs पे आपका खास तौर पे फोकस है. इनफैक्ट पिछले 2-3 साल का डेटा साफ तौर पे बताता है कि पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक्स के ही NPAs ज़्यादा बढ़े हैं. लेकिन चूंकि आप रेजोल्यूशन पे फोकस कर रहे हैं, अगर उसी की बात करें तो जैसे एक एग्जांपल ध्यान में आता है, जो एक बड़ी एयरलाइन डूब गई, वहाँ पे प्राइवेट सेक्टर बैंक ने एक डील करके अपने NPAs बेच दिए. पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक ने अपने पूरे के पूरे अमाउंट को फाइनली प्रोवाइड किया है, और अब शायद वो राइट ऑफ ही करेंगे, वो जितना भी रिकवर कर पाएँ. तो ये जो फ़र्क है, और एक बैंक चेयरमैन से उनके रिटायरमेंट के बाद मेरी बात हो रही थी, उन्होंने कहा कि मेरे पास 10,000 करोड़ तक के प्रपोजल्स थे NPAs रिजॉल्व करने के, पर मैंने डिसीजन नहीं लिया क्योंकि मेरे रिटायरमेंट के बाद उसकी इंक्वायरी चलेगी, पता नहीं क्या होगा, मैं क्यों अपना टाइम बर्बाद करूँ.
So that is precisely the problem. One, the private sector banks have been very quick to recognize the problem and get out. Public sector banks have been left holding the problem. So we want the public sector banks to also act quickly. And we want the private sector banks to come together with the public sector banks. So we are proposing that committees be formed which involve everybody, that everybody is in it together. One fellow doesn't run away with the money and leave the others holding the bank. Public sector banks can't all run away, because they are 75% of the banking system. If they run away, there's nothing left. Who's going to buy it from them?
कहीं आप एक इंडिपेंडेंट वैल्यूअर की भी बात कर रहे हैं उस ड्राफ्ट में, तो क्या आप ये चाहते हैं कि एक ऑब्जेक्टिव वैल्यूएशन सिस्टम निकल के आए जिसका ओनर्स फिर बैंक चेयरमैन के ऊपर नहीं आए कि उन्होंने डिसीजन नहीं लिया?
I think it is important, both from perspective of legitimizing the decision for the bank chairman, but also from the public's perspective. There is a feeling that all these deals are very cozy, done between the bank and the promoter, and in the process the taxpayer, who eventually has to pay for the losses on the bank balance sheet, is left in the lurch. So what we're saying is that for the big deals which are coming under some concern, apprehension, have an independent evaluation where he will see whether it's economically viable, so it's not being pushed under the carpet, and second, whether it's fair to all the parties concerned, including the banks. And if that proposal meets that hurdle, that independent evaluation says, okay, let's proceed with it. That also makes it less likely that down the line some of our investigative agencies will have to ask questions, because you follow due process. The important thing investigative agencies or the judiciary want to know is, did you apply your mind? Did you do it in a, they're not saying don't do it, because times have changed. The road project which you financed is not providing the revenues that you wanted on time. So you have to make some changes in the loan, but do it in such a way that it's fair to everybody and that you applied your mind in doing it, and that's what the independent evaluation will look at.
Even consortiums में भी कुछ एक प्राइवेट सेक्टर बैंकर्स ने हमें जो फीडबैक दिया है कि जिस बैंक के चेयरमैन के आखिरी 6 महीने चल रहे होते हैं वो बैंक थोड़ा पीछे हट जाता है, तो बहुत सारे केसेस अटक जाते हैं. और इंसिडेंटली इन दिनों हमने देखा है कि ज़्यादातर PSU बैंक चेयरमैन जो है वो साल 1.5 साल के टेन्योर के साथ ही आ रहे हैं. क्या फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री और RBI के बीच में इस बारे में कोई चर्चा हुई है कि किस तरह से एक स्टेबिलिटी दी जाए इस पूरे प्रोसेस को, या शायद इवन बैंक चेयरमैन को टेन्योर पूरा दिया जाए?
There are two issues. One is, of course, the how do you pressure banks to deal with the problem quickly. Second issue is how do you deal with the structural problems in the public sector banks, one of which you mentioned is the short tenure of bank chairmen. There's this feeling that they have too short a tenure and it doesn't let them take the right decisions. But then there are so many other issues which need to be dealt with in the public sector banks. I would separate these two issues. You need to move on this one. You also need to move on that one, but the time horizon to move on that one may be a little longer because it involves a whole set of parties. The government has to come in. But what we can do is move quickly on this one. We don't control the appointments of public sector bank chairman directly. The government does. And so we have to work with the government on that.
Okay. तो सबसे ज़्यादा जो अवेटेड चीज़ है बैंक लाइसेंस उस पे आते हैं आखिर में आपने जनवरी के आखिर तक की जो डेडलाइन दी थी क्या वो मीट होगी?
I think the aim is to finish it as close to the end of tenure of Mr. Anand Sinha as possible, because he's been the central figure involved in driving this. He retires on January 17th. I think what we're talking about is within this a month or two of that, I hope to be able to give the bank licenses, but I don't want it delayed longer than that. I also, let me put it this way, don't want the process to be hurried more than consistent with doing all the work. We have people here who've been working weekends to try and provide data to the committee for them to take the right decision. So I don't want to make the decision in a hurry either. I want to make the decision in the fastest time that is consistent with doing the job right. So we are moving as many government agencies as we need to give us back the information. Where we are not getting the information, we're moving ahead with the idea we'll come back when the information is got. So we're moving as fast as possible. I don't want unnecessary delays, but I don't want to miss out on anything that we will need to do to give the licenses in the right spirit.
तो अप्रैल तक licenses जारी हो जाएंगे ऐसे
I would hope that would be certainly by that time, if not before.
लेकिन जिस तरह से काफ़ी कॉर्पोरेट्स ने अपने नाम पीछे खींचे हैं उससे ऐसा लगता है कि ये जो सबसे ज़्यादा एक्साइटिंग पार्ट था इस पूरे नए दौर का कि आप कंपनीज को लाइसेंस देंगे उस पर काफ़ी क्वेश्चंस मार्क आ गए.
Exciting, yeah, controversial. I don't know which way you put it. I wouldn't say काफ़ी corporates. I'd say one corporate, which is Tata's, withdrew, not because they didn't want a bank license, but they felt that the conditions we had imposed on the bank licenses would not sit well with some of their overseas operations, because they'd have to restructure those to bring them under the finance company, and they thought at least at this point they felt that may be a place that they were not fully comfortable with. It's not, I don't think that others have expressed a reservation about the licenses. Let's wait and see.
क्योंकि काफ़ी जो कंसल्टेंट से हम बात कर रहे हैं या जो एप्लीकेंट्स हैं उनसे बात करें उनका कहना है कि पहले 18 महीने बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होंगे और उसमें वो पूरी तरह से शायद इसको समझ पाएंगे. शुरुआत में जैसे टाटास ने भी कहा कि चूंकि बहुत कम टाइम था तो हमने फटाफट एप्लीकेशन दे दिए, पर जो इश्यूज टाटास को आए हैं क्यों वो किसी बिरला ग्रुप या एडीएजी ग्रुप को नहीं आएंगे?
Tata's had an important outside financing vehicle for JLR, which may have played a role in their decision. I won't go into details. I don't know what factors went into their decision. That may not be the same thing for the other conglomerates. But no, their license application is with us. We will treat them as every other license application and take a view. After that, whether they go ahead or not, I mean, that will be their choice.
मई में गवर्नमेंट चेंज होने की पूरी संभावना है और जो एक्स फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर हैं हो सकता है कि वो फ्यूचर फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर भी बने और उन्होंने ये कहा है कि वो नहीं चाहते कि कॉर्पोरेट्स को लाइसेंस दिया जाए. तो इस माहौल में आपको लगता है कि ये डिसीजन इलेक्शन के पहले लिया जाना चाहिए?
See, whatever decision government has to go on, regardless of who's in power. Government makes a decision based on, thinking within the institutions of government, and I'm talking about RBI as part of the governance structure. I cannot become the new governor of the RBI and say I'm going to change all the decisions that were made in the past. In that case, decisions have no sanctity. There has to be some continuity. We in the RBI, together in conversation with the government, made the decision to allow corporates to apply for bank licenses. So we have to follow the procedure and investigate their applications and then make a decision based on whether we think they're fit and proper. That decision will be made and it will follow the process that were laid out. We cannot anticipate what a new government will say or what the next RBI governor after me will say. We have to follow precedent. So this is how government has to work to give some certainty to people in the business community. So I think we'll follow that process.
यानी इलेक्शन के पहले अगर आपने एक लाइसेंस इशू किया तो वो irrevocable होगा, सरकार बदल जाए, उनकी पॉलिसी बदल जाए, उससे फर्क नहीं पड़ता.
Have you seen a license revoked for other banks because the government changed? No. It has to be something that will be, something the RBI will do. The RBI's board will finally grant the licenses, and it is something that governments have to respect. Now, we will, I think, take a very reasoned, careful decision on this, because as people have said, the bank is a license to print money, and licenses should go to the right people. So we have to take a decision which can be defended, which is as transparent as we can make it. But we have to take a decision. We can't anticipate what all future governments may think about this decision. We have to work with the government of the day.
तो जिस तरह से टाटास ने भी कहा कि हम फिर मौका मिला तो अप्लाई करेंगे, दूसरे लोग भी ऐसा सोचने लगे हैं कि शायद आरबीआई की पॉलिसी या सरकार की पॉलिसी ये होने वाली है कि ऑन टैप लाइसेंसेस रखे जाएं. ऐसा नहीं है कि ये एक लास्ट राउंड है, फिर लाइसेंसेस नहीं मिलेंगे. ये सोच वाकई चल रही है?
हाँ, we have a paper out which discusses on tap licenses, and we will take a view on that once we give this round of licenses. We are debating that. We have asked for comments. We will put that paper together. But over time, I don't think we should wait 10 years between licenses. We'll give licenses more frequently and have a process by which applications can be made more frequently.
Okay. चूँकि हम पहली बार मिल रहे हैं आपके आने के बाद, पिछले 3 महीनों में एक इंटरेस्टिंग ट्रेंड जो हमने नोटिस किया है, पहले हर पॉलिसी के 1 या 2 दिन पहले फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर, फाइनेंस सेक्रेटरी सब ये डिमांड करते थे, रेट घटाइए या रेट मत बढ़ाइए. आप जब से आए हैं तब से ये डिमांड आनी बंद हो गई है. आपकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग बहुत बेटर है लगता है.
Yeah, I think the discussion between the finance ministry and the RBI has always been there. I think we've always talked to the finance ministry, and both sides try to persuade. I mean, see, I think in terms of long-term objectives, we are exactly the same. High growth, low inflation. There's no difference. In terms of short-term steps and short-term objectives, there may be a certain difference in they would put more weight on perhaps on growth, we would put more weight perhaps on inflation. And so there's a debate, there's a discussion, and they try and persuade us and we try and persuade them. Ultimately the decision is ours. But the dialogue happens. It happens here, it happens in the US. If you remember, Greenspan and Treasury Secretary Rubin used to meet every week. I think that probably continued after Bernanke came. That you have to have both players on the same table. They don't need to necessarily agree, but at least both should know what's in the mind of the other.
लेकिन अगर सरकार बदल जाती है, फिर भी ये जो एक नई हम कोऑर्डिनेशन देख रहे हैं आरबीआई और फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री के बीच, ये बरकरार रहेगी, मानना चाहिए.
I mean, we will, on our side, we will absolutely offer full cooperation to whatever government is in power. We are, after all, an arm of the government, and we have to work with whatever finance minister is there, and I think that dialogue will continue.
ये जो लोग कह रहे थे जब आपका नाम प्रपोज हो रहा था, प्रोसेस में था, कि आपको चूंकि ब्यूरोक्रेसी का एक्सपीरियंस नहीं है, सरकार कैसे चलती है एक्चुअली वो आपको पता नहीं है, वो आपके लिए एक प्रॉब्लम होगी. आपको ऐसे कोई हैंडीकैप दरअसल नहीं लगता?
See, I spent 3.5 years in the IMF, which is a bureaucracy par excellence. If you think the IAS has bureaucracy well understood and sewed up, you haven't seen the IMF. These are all PhD bureaucrats, not masters and bachelors bureaucrats. So if you can deal with that system, I think dealing with the Indian bureaucracy is not that difficult. That said, I mean, look, I think there are good people all over the government, and they, people want to work together to, see growth come back to the country, to see, inflation come down, to see structural reform. So I think that the language is and the intent is there across the government. So this notion that the bureaucrat only wants to put red tape on everything, I think is misplaced. And our finance ministry is very dynamic. It's got good people in there. So.
क्योंकि आप स्टेबिलिटी का एक प्लैंक लेकर चले हैं और अभी तक कामयाब रहे हैं, अगर चुनावों के बाद एक हंग पार्लियामेंट आती है, क्या वो एक बड़ा चैलेंज होगा फाइनेंशियल स्टेबिलिटी के लिए, जिसके लिए आपने अब तक इतनी मेहनत की है?
आई थिंक policy uncertainty will create some difficulty, but I think the sense from past experience has been that governments rarely overturn the consensus significantly. Typically, even these hung parliaments. Remember that Mr. Chidambaram's dream budget was produced in a hung parliament. I think that there is a policy consensus which will take us forward, perhaps not with the same pace as if we had a majority party with consensus behind it, pushing forward, majority coalition I should say, pushing forward. But even these fragmented parliaments, I think will create some policy uncertainty, but I don't think there will be a sense that policy will be reversed dramatically. I think we have to work with whatever happens post-election. I'm hopeful that we get a stable government post-election. Let's see.
आखिर मैं आपसे एक थोड़ा मुश्किल सवाल पूछना चाहता हूं, क्या आपको पता है आपकी एक भविष्यवाणी जो बिल्कुल गलत साबित हुई है?
नहीं।
आपने पहले दिन ये कहा था कि आपकी पॉपुलैरिटी उस दिन हाईएस्ट है, उसके बाद कम होगी, लेकिन दरअसल आपकी पॉपुलैरिटी लगातार बढ़ी है। जिस तरह से आपने रुपए को नीचे लिया और अभी आपने जब रेट नहीं बढ़ाए तो वो और ज़्यादा बढ़ी है, तो हम ये उम्मीद करते हैं कि ये और ज़्यादा आगे बढ़ेगी।
नहीं, मैं पॉपुलैरिटी कॉन्टेस्ट में नहीं हूँ। मुझे अभी कम करना चाहिए।
लेकिन इसके साथ ही बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका हमारे लिए वक्त निकालने के लिए। तो ये थे आरबीआई गवर्नर जिन्होंने कुछ संकेत दिए अपनी आने वाली पॉलिसीज के बारे में। काफ़ी ज़्यादा अनिश्चितता के माहौल में आरबीआई गवर्नर का पर्सपेक्टिव हमने समझने की कोशिश की। नमस्कार।